It's so funny being blind doing this because I really can't see dick all. I should put my fucking contacts in. Why didn't I do that? I'll go put my contacts in. I always need my emotional support water bottle before I get started. Now I'm ready. Welcome to Human to Human. My name is Jess, and today I'm going to tell you a little story, and then we're going to talk about some things, because that's what you do on a podcast. And what I'm talking about today has really been a conversation coming up so much in my personal life. So I was like, fuck, I know I need to talk about this on the podcast. I don't know exactly how I want to say it and frame it. And then I had this instance happen where I was like, ooh, this is my poo talk segment for this episode. And this is how we're going to get into what we're talking about today. So a couple weeks ago, I was with some friends at an Airbnb. And the first night we went off. I had quite a bit to drink. I went in the, oh my God, you know, you're litty off your titty when you go into a hot tub and at the end of the night and you're like, okay, I'm feeling some funny things and I don't think I should stay in this hot tub. My mom always warned me never to like go in a hot tub and continue drinking alcohol. She's like, if you're in a hot tub, you need to chug water. And boy, is that girl right. So I drank a lot and had a little bit of a hungover morning, and I can't, like, when I'm hungover, this is also why I made a whole episode about how I've just gotten more intentional with my relationship with alcohol, and I just don't drink as much as I usually do. So I knew, like, on this trip, I'd go hard one night, and then the other night I'd chill the fuck out. So the first night when I went off and drank more than I knew would make me feel good the next morning, I felt like shit the next morning. And you know when you're like anticipating that hungover poo and you're like, it's coming, I'm doing the things, I'm drinking my lemon water, or for you, you're probably drinking your coffee, and I'm, you know, ate my breakfast, sat outside, had the shakes a little, and then it was time. And I hate when you're, you know, sharing. There's only 2 bathrooms, which is better than 1, thank God, but there's 2 bathrooms, and there was like at least 9 of us, and in the morning everybody's bowel movements are up and moving, like especially with all of us drinking the night before. So you gotta be freaking ready to be in and out kind of thing. And I started to have to shit so badly, and both bathrooms were occupied. One of the guys was like playing music and having this like lovely shower, reviving him, bringing him back to the world, and then the other one, the guy was taking a really long poo. And so I kept like doing the poop, I'm gonna poo my pants dance, like being like, oh my God, okay, because I don't want to take my hungover poo until my butt is so ready to let it out, because then it's not going to be enjoyable. I mean, it's never enjoyable, but anyway, finally I get to the bathroom, and I'm a squatty potty girl. Once you go squatty potty, you never go back, which a squatty potty is basically like a little elevated stool in front of the toilet that you can put your feet on, and it just makes the angle in which you poo 10 times better. Like, there's a whole video on it. I'll link it in the show notes. It's so funny, and it basically explains how, like, the way your intestines are, you need to have your legs elevated, and our toilets in North America are not built like that. So I do a makeshift squatty potty if I'm not at home, and I take the garbage can and I put my feet on it. So I know, TMI, like, do you really need to know this much about my fucking morning hungover shit? I don't know. You're listening, so here we are. I'm almost done. And so then I'm just like sitting there scrolling on my phone, taking my poo, and my cousin calls me, and I'm like, shit. Because just the day before, my grandma called me and was like, hey, like, your cousin's having a bit of a hard time. He's pretty stressed. Like, if you could call him, I really think he could use your support. First of all, my grandma is so fucking cute. The fact that, like, she's just trying to look out for her grandkids and, like, have her grandkids support each other, like, that's awesome. Like, I don't usually call my cousins, but having someone give me the little push to call my cousin is great. And the day before, my cousin had, like, told me about all the things he was stressing about. Whatever. So the fact that he's calling me the next day, I'm like, oh shit, like, I hope things are okay. I hope things didn't get worse. So I'm on the fucking toilet taking my hungover poo, and I answer the phone. And you might be like, Jess, why didn't you just like text him, tell him you'll call him back in a minute? I don't know why I didn't do that. I answer. And also, like, you know, the people when like I think I'm like this too, when you're stressing about something and you just need to go off and vent, and it doesn't kind of matter. Like I knew answering that phone call, I was like, I'm not going to talk a lot. So I'll like wipe up, finish my business. And he like probably won't even notice I'm on the can because he's just like going off about his life. So that's what I did. We chatted, and then I left. He was still talking my ear off, and I sat outside and he was talking. And then it was hard because it was like a lot of mental health struggles with someone close to him and other stuff that he was going through. And I'm like at an Airbnb weekend partying, whatever, but my family and supporting people when they're going through a hard time is like a very important thing for me. So I continued talking to him, but like, you know, I'm already hungover. I'm already not feeling good. I'm already a little having the shakes. I also was very like low on sleep. And so when I got off the phone with him, I just felt this like heaviness of like, I wish I could help him more. We can't fix people. That's the reality of the situation. We just can't. And I went and I talked to like my boyfriend and his best friend, and they were like, this is what he needs to do. This is how he needs to fix his situation. And I was like, guys, thank you, but I need your support right now. I don't care about your opinions about what my cousin needs to do. I need you guys to just support me in how I'm feeling right now. Which, first of all, can we talk about the communication? Oh, just like a very open communicating girly over here. So that was great. And they were just like there for me. And I just felt this heaviness, and it just got me thinking about the fucking mental health crisis we're in. There's so much hard stuff going on in the world, and with our phones and with the way our culture is and how much pressure there is put on us from society, there is such a hard toll that this takes on so many of our mental healths, if not all of our mental healths. I don't think that's a plural word. And I've been having so many conversations about being open to hearing other people's perspectives, because I went to a high school that was very, very progressive, very activist, very accepting of the gay community and trans community, LGBTQ plus people, all of those things. And it was so wonderful. It was an art school, and my best friends are all a part of that community, and there's so many pros to it, but there were also many cons to it. First of all, it was a predominantly white school because there's a certain level of privilege because you had to audition to get in. And in order to audition and actually get accepted, like, you have to be pretty good at the art that you're doing. Like, it was more of a, like, it wasn't just like casual. It was like the teachers were really intense about it, which, yes, like, helped set people up for success who actually wanted to become an artist when they graduated. I was literally about to say, not me, not like me. I'm not an artist. Yes, Jess, you're a fucking artist. You have a podcast. The fuck? I just went to school there for musical theater for 3 years, and then I switched to photography for my last year. So not necessarily podcasting, but everyone there had this element of privilege because I'm going to use, like, if you're a dance major, for example, if you're auditioning to get into dance, you've probably been a dancer your whole life, and your family had the money to pay for you to go to dance lessons, to pay for you to be in competitive dance. And because of that, it was also like the location in Toronto is a very white neighborhood, blah, 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 blah. So because of that, there's perspective we did not have at that school. There were people who were of color or in minority groups, but it was so slim, the number of people who were not white. And because of that, you live in a bubble. So I lived in a very specific bubble where it was very like, you can't fuck up, you can't say the wrong thing, very cancel culture. And I actually looked up the definition of cancel culture before we began because I wanted to just give the definition of it so it made sense why I'm like explaining it in this whole episode. And Wikipedia, which I just graduated a psych degree, and you never ever use Wikipedia, ever, ever, ever. So take that as a grain of salt, but I'm just looking for a definition. And it says, cancel culture is a phrase contemporarily, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's just find the main thing. Okay, so yeah. Cancel culture is used to refer to a culture in which those who are deemed to have acted or spoken in an unacceptable manner are ostracized, boycotted, or shunned. So if you say something offensive, if you say a racial slur, which like that's fucked, like you're completely ostracized, you're boycotted, you're shunned, you're basically like isolated from the community. People say like, you should not be someone anyone is friends with. You should not be someone people talk to. You should not be someone that is given a platform. You should not be someone who can be successful. You should not be someone who can influence other people. It's a pretty fucking extreme way to deal with someone who may have been rude, hurtful, homophobic, racist, but like any of those things. It's a pretty extreme way to deal with the situation. Okay, so then Wikipedia also says, the term cancel culture is predominantly used when these responses are to right-wing actions or speech, but is rare when the response are to left-wing actions or speech. So people are canceled way more often from someone who's like, let's say, very liberal. The person who's canceling is usually very liberal, and the person getting canceled is usually pretty conservative. And that was the exact situation I felt like I experienced at my high school. And it went really far. How is any progress gonna be made about anything if we say this is someone you should never trust and never talk to? Fuck them, let's isolate them from society and from our community. Well, let's talk about the mental health crisis. What does that do to your mental health? And not only like, what does that do to your mental health, but you have no opportunity to learn. You have no chance to say, I fucked up, I was ignorant, I didn't know, or I didn't do my research, or I didn't have the opportunity to learn that like using this term is derogatory, or using this term is rude and offensive and not okay, or like I don't know the history behind this phrase that I said. Like when we cancel someone and say, fuck you, you should never be allowed to have a job, that person is given no opportunity to learn from their mistakes and understand where they went wrong and figure out, how do I do better? What do I do going forward? Where did I fuck up and how can I make amends? So I'm not just using Wikipedia as the source, because I've learned about cancel culture and this kind of stuff in a few different classes that I took in school and my own research and stuff. But something Wikipedia did say is that cancel culture is some critics argue that cancel culture is unproductive and does not bring real social change. It causes intolerance and amounts to cyberbullying. And I agree with the fact that it does not bring any real social change. And when we cancel people, we're not taking into account their perspective, where they're coming from, what their experiences were like. And this has been a real eye-opening experience for my own life, because I have gotten close with people who have very different views than I do, and I have actually had moments where I felt very stressed and been like, oh my God, people from my high school would cancel me because I'm having a conversation with someone who doesn't understand or support trans rights the way I do. And I had this internalized deep fear that like people aren't gonna think I'm a good person anymore because I'm entertaining a conversation with someone who, you know, doesn't believe in the thing that I believe in, or doesn't believe in basic human rights, which I believe gay rights and trans rights are a part of basic human rights. But again, here we get into it. Is they come from a completely different place than I do. Their perspective is completely different than mine is, and we are having open conversations where I am making my point clear and they're making their points clear. And yes, 100% there are moments where I get really annoyed or I get really heated, or I'm like, you're being such a fucking asshole, like how could you even say that, how could you even believe that? And they're making points where they're like, I think you're being a little delusional. But we're hearing each other out and we're having these conversations without getting defensive, without putting our back up and being like, fuck you, I'm never talking to you ever again, and like closing the door. Because what does that do? That isolates us, that removes people from our community, that restricts us from learning from other people. Let's bring it back to where I came from. I am like 9 to 10 generations Canadian. I am a white cisgender, and cisgender means that the gender I am born with is, or the sex that I was born with is the same as the gender I present myself as. I was born a biological female. I present as a female. I'm a woman. I identify she, her are my pronouns. So I am coming from this place where I am straight. I am cisgendered. I am white. I grew up with like my boyfriend, first person to come into my family who's not white. So I need to sit back and be like, I will never know what it is like to live as someone who is of color. I will never know what it's like to live as someone who's transgender. I will never know what it's like to immigrate to Canada. So who am I to sit here and say, fuck you, your perspective isn't valid because you don't believe what I believe? I believe in respect. I believe that even if you don't agree with the way someone lives their life, it doesn't give you any right to shame it or to disrespect them or to put them down. I absolutely don't agree with that. And that's also this beautiful thing of having these conversations, is that like, if we don't have open, honest conversations with people where we feel safe, like the people I am having these like deep political controversial discussions with, I feel safe with them. And so I'm not saying go out on the street and fight with the person who's like saying anti-abortion, you know, like I never am the type of person to get into those conversations. Those people used to come outside my high school, and you better believe some of my peers ripped those people to shreds, or they at least tried. I'm not like that. I don't want to yell at someone to try and make them believe what I believe. I don't think someone will ever believe what I believe if I'm just getting all up in your face, getting mad at you about it. I think like when I have these conversations, I come from this place of like compassion and emotionalness and understanding, and like it gets deep and it gets hard and it gets confusing, because also something you've believed your whole life, if someone brings up a point that might put a little shift in your whole thought process, that makes things confusing. And we like to look at the world in probably our own one specific lens, but we are such better people when we give ourselves the opportunity to learn. My life would be so different if I was dating someone who was white. My conversations would be different. The things I'm talking about on my podcast would probably be different. And dating Josh, he's the first person I've really been very close with who has experienced like racism, and he's a person of color. Like, I am going to be honest and say my friends leading up to now are all white. We're all white. Now I have friends who are not white. And we're so fucking scared of acknowledging our privilege. And then, okay, so this is cool because like this is some of the stuff I've actually learned about in a class. There's a few different authors and activists who write about these topics like woke culture, cancel culture, calling out culture, whatever the fuck you want to call it. And one author, her name is Kai Chang Tom, and she wrote this incredible piece about woke cultures. I forget what it's called, but if I can find the name, which I'm sure I can, I will link it in the show notes. And she's a trans woman from her parents are Chinese immigrants, and she writes about how woke culture doesn't give us the opportunity to learn, but also people who are a part of this culture, which is like we're all, you know, kind of getting inundated with information from it, they lead with the thing that they're most oppressed by. So for me, an example would be like, but I'm a woman, and because I'm a woman, I'm oppressed, or because I'm a woman, like I don't have the same opportunities as men. And that's very true in a lot of circumstances, that I don't have the same opportunity as like a white man per se, especially if I was trying to be like a CEO of a tech company, for example. But the thing that this author is trying to say, and the point they're trying to get across, is that like we try to seem cooler by leading with the thing that we're oppressed by, which is just wild, because it's like that's kind of trying to glamorize the experience or take a victim mentality of like, I'm oppressed. And it's like, yes, let's acknowledge and validate the ways that people are treated differently based on gender and sex and sexuality and race and vaccine status and abortion rights, abortion stances, like whether you are pro-abortion, anti-abortion, pro-life, like whatever you want to fucking call it. I have my own views and opinions, but obviously I'm not sitting here to be like, you should believe what I believe. I'm sitting here to say there are valid points from everybody's perspective, and if we're not open to having conversations about it, we're never going to learn. There's no way like We are going to unite together. Audre Lorde is another activist and author that writes about how, like, we assume that we can't unite if we're different. But difference is not a prerequisite for coming together and trying to make social change. We can acknowledge our differences and celebrate them and say, great, we might believe different things, but how about we all work for equal respect, equal rights for people? And you might be sitting here and you might be like, the bitch, fuck, what the fuck? I don't agree with any of this shit. But it's like, okay, don't agree with having open conversations. Where the fuck are we going to go? We're going to stay stagnant and we're not going to move anywhere positive. Another point that I wanted to make was that there's a difference between intellectually understanding something and emotionally understanding something. So I said, like, I will never understand what it's like to be someone of color. It's funny because we can kind of like intellectualize the experience and be like, you know, before I met my boyfriend, I was like, logically, I understand racism and how fucked up it is. But there is such a different experience when you are deeply close to someone who goes through it. When you notice how, like, their race and how they present has a ripple effect now on, like, my relationship with him and how we're treated in the world. And I feel the same way about people who are a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And this is the conversation that I have with people who necessarily don't understand fully. And, like, this is the thing as well. I'm friends with people who grew up in communities where that was not normalized. Nobody was openly gay. Nobody was supportive of transitioning and identifying as a different gender. That was not a normal thing. And what was normalized was derogatory terms like being like, oh my God, that's so gay, and using the word gay as a negative thing. And if that's what you've grown up with, that's what is normal to you. So who am I to be like, how the fuck can you not support, you know, people who decide to be trans, when it's like, they never understood what that meant. They were never taught what that meant growing up. For me, there was a fucking all gender bathroom at my high school. Like, anyone could go in this bathroom. And it was like, there was trust that you use that all gender bathroom for using the bathroom and not to just go fuck someone. You know what I mean? There was that much respect and acknowledgement of, if you present as a different gender that's not male or female, or you feel uncomfortable using one of those, you can always use the all gender bathroom. That is a rare experience. And I can't sit here and expect someone to understand that who never lived it. And so I feel the same way as, like, I struggle, because this is the point I always try and make, is that, like, if your child were to come out as gay or trans, or if you had a very great close friend that you love deeply who decided they're going to transition or who came out as gay, would your perspective of them change? Would you love them any less? And it's so interesting when we see older generations who struggle to use, like, they, them pronouns, or who struggle to understand someone transitioning or someone choosing to be in, like, a same-sex marriage. And then they have it's cute, and I'm privileged to have this experience as well, because there's people in my family who are going through this and experiencing this and adapting to this, and the older generation, you know, struggle with it. But then I've seen examples of them showing their support in other ways, like struggling to use they, them pronouns, but then this specific man that's in, you know, a Gen X generation wore a happy Pride shirt, like, you know, to support, especially in Pride Month. And that is beautiful to me, because this person is struggling to understand, and they're trying their best to be respectful with pronouns, and they're coming from a place of, like, this isn't normal to me, I'm really struggling. But then they still show their support in that beautiful way of, like, wearing a Pride shirt. And I tell all of these stories to normalize that, like, just because you don't understand doesn't mean you can't be respectful. I think no matter what, we should be giving people respect. No matter how different someone is than us, they are a human, they have emotions, they go through mental health issues just like the rest of us, probably in different ways, sometimes in more extreme or less extreme ways. So who am I to disrespect someone's choice? And at the end of the day, too, like, our beliefs come from our core values. And a lot of us have different core values. A lot of us believe different things. A lot of us choose to do different things with our bodies. And just because you don't understand what someone decides to do doesn't mean you can't be like, hey, I hope you're okay. And I think you're a cool person. Or just don't be a dick. It doesn't even need to go that far, but just like, don't be a dick. Don't roll your eyes at someone in public. Don't try your best to use the pronouns they prefer to go by. And the funny thing is too, if you don't know, you can ask. And I know that's something that can be weird and, ambiguous or just like an uncomfortable situation, but I was talking to a friend yesterday and she was telling me about how a group of people we all know went out and I wasn't able to go. And she said she was like a little drunk and feeling a little frisky. And she was like, so like, what's everyone's updated pronouns like as of late? Like, what's going on? Fill me in. I just want to know if anything's changed. And one of our friends had explored different pronouns and my friend was like, cool, okay, I wouldn't have known that otherwise. And that was just like a fun, silly, goofy way to also check in and be like, where's everybody at? What's going on? And you might be like, oh, that's such an extreme way to blah blah, but it's like, listen, it's all becoming normalized and such a beautiful thing, and that's a way to respect each other. And that's why, like, when you meet new people, let's say in like a yoga class I took the other day, the teacher started the class and she said like, my name is, I don't remember her name, and my pronouns are she, her. And it's just normalizing the experience, putting your pronouns in your work signature. Oh fuck, I should put mine in my work signature. Can you tell how many deep breaths I've been taking in this episode? Because it's like, whew, this is a hardcore topic. Seriously, and it's something that I've wanted to make an episode about for a long time, but I wasn't sure how to exactly communicate it. But these conversations have been just like so prominent in my everyday life. And okay, there's a few more things I want to say. There's one more thing, but now I thought of another, and I'm going to tell this first. So back to the older generations and them trying to learn and adapt and evolve. And again, like, there's people our generation as well in Gen Z who are again as well learning, adapting, evolving, trying to understand something that they don't actually get yet. And my mom is like the cutest example of this, because like I said, there's someone in our family who goes by they, them. And my mom was like, I'm so proud of myself, Jess. She's like, I was on the phone, and she was on the phone with like her older cousin who's like related. Again, like, it's all related, whatever. And my mom's on the phone and she's like, I was on the phone and I used they, them pronouns the whole time. And I was just like, so like nonchalant about it. I was just committed to saying the pronouns, not making it a weird thing. Just like, she was like, it was so good. It just gave me practice where like you weren't there and like nobody else was there. It was like just on the phone, just us two. And I know that she's like uncomfortable about it and not used to these pronouns and doesn't get it. But my mom was like, I just want to be an example that like we can respect people's choices and make this normalized and just like, it doesn't have to be a thing. And, the response was like the cousin of my mom was like, like, I don't really understand this. Like what is going on? And my mom was like, girl, I'm trying not to use their names because they kept saying each other's names. My mom was like, girl, like, this is how it is now. This is how it is. This is where the world's going. And like, we got to adapt. And I'm just like, God bless my mom. My mom is, again, a Gen X generation, and it was never normal. And my mom is like, yeah, like, us older people do struggle with like they, them is plural, and like we associate it with multiple people. But my mom's like, I still wanted to just like be respectful and get the opportunity to just like do it and use the pronouns and, not make it a crazy big thing and just normalize, because that was her normalizing it for someone else. And that is amazing. There's a ripple effect when we just like stand in our choice to just be respectful. Another thing that Kai Chang Tom wrote in the woke culture piece about people who don't have access to this politically correct language, who don't have the opportunity to learn about these terms that we are now throwing around so loosely, like gender binaries and pronouns, and trying to not to say certain words because they're offensive now. Like I love I love this piece because this author just pointed out that like there are many cultures and many religions that aren't accepting of same-sex marriages or changing your gender. And there are many people from older generations or working class individuals who don't have access to the information that will tell you what's I'm doing quotes like politically correct, or, you know, the right thing or the wrong thing to say. And that's really helpful because there's not a lot of conversation, I find, around the fact that like this is a privileged thing to worry about. I also believe that this is something that is very important, but there's a certain level of privilege to being able to feel safe enough in your own body to be like, okay, how do I want to express my gender? How do I want to express my sexuality? What is my sexuality? Who am I? What is my identity? And how does that relate to these things that society puts on us? Like, you know, this is what it means to be female and this is what it means to be male. And I say that because, like I was saying before, I've started to listen to other people's perspectives who were like, I grew up or I came or my family is from somewhere that like literally were worrying about education and food and having enough clean drinking water, or, you know, like we're worried about making sure we're safe at night. And there's many examples of places you can go with that, but like again, like you need to check off many basic necessities before you're able to like explore your sexuality. And so it's important to sit and sometimes acknowledge that like not everyone comes from a situation where they can just like spend time start understanding themselves better to the point of figuring out who they want to marry or who they want to date or who they want to have a relationship with or sex with or how they want to present themselves to the world. And that's something that like I think we should work to be in this place where people can have those basic necessities met. But like again, like we're having these problems in North America. When I talk to my boyfriend, he's like, people in India aren't talking about this shit, at least not the part that he said he's from. Like, this isn't a conversation that's being had because this isn't a problem that's at the forefront of their mind. And so just to kind of sum up this whole episode, I want us to be aware that our perspective is one perspective, and it is the one we understand the most because it's our own. But the way someone else grew up, the schools someone else went to, the places someone lived when they grew up, the places they've traveled, the places they've immigrated to, are all ways that our perspective shifts. When we have these conversations and we get really angry, we can be angry, and I think that's a valid part of it, but I think there's also this deep sadness of like, you're being disrespectful about this, or you're just not taking into account this perspective. And you have to fucking check your privilege to do this. Our egos are so fucking big. And I've had so many circumstances where I've been like, I want to feel like I'm right. I want to sit here and in my core, I think I know I'm right. But then I, thank God, have people who love me enough and are patient enough to be like, Jess, I'm going to explain to you why this thing you said was a very privileged place where you were coming from, that like you can't just like think you're right and that's it, because they're valid as well. And this is something that has also come up a lot in my relationship because I'm white and my boyfriend's brown. And like I said, he is the first person to come into my family who isn't white. No one else in my family has dated someone who's not white, which blew my fucking mind when I started to realize all of this. And so there's been a lot of circumstances where someone has said something or used a specific tone or said something in a specific way that definitely had some underlying, probably internalized racism, and I have had to sit back and slowly start to acknowledge this. And I didn't have to sit back. I am choosing to recognize when these things happen and have really hard, uncomfortable conversations with myself and my boyfriend and my parents and my brother and my extended family. This shit isn't easy, but it is so worth it because I am having people point things out to me that I didn't realize I was doing or saying before. And then I also have the opportunity to point things out for other people that they may not have realized before. And I have had conversations with my parents about fears I've had or just feelings I've had or do have about dating someone who isn't white and being in an interracial relationship and making sure that he's always respected and making sure that like we are safe as a couple. And it is such a wonderful, beautiful thing to also, and again, this is privilege because I'm really lucky to have parents who want to learn and be surrounded by people who do want to give love and be respectful for the most part. And it's such a beautiful experience to then notice how my parents start to flag things that people have said and be like, ooh, I think that was coming from a place of internalized racism. And I'm like, damn, okay. Like, it's a trickle effect of learning and educating. And that's why I hate cancel culture, because it doesn't give us that room. And so when we can have these open conversations and get really uncomfortable and admit that we were wrong in some way, we have the opportunity to do better, be better, and just then have that affect other people in our lives and get closer. These experiences have brought me so much closer to so many people in my life, and it's something I'm just so grateful for. I'm realizing how many stories I have because I have another story. So one time I went out for brunch with my boyfriend and all of his friends, and they're a very, very diverse friend group. There's a black guy, a brown guy, an Asian guy, a white guy, an Arab guy, like they all have very different perspectives, which is really interesting. And my boyfriend Josh and I were talking before we went to brunch because we'd all slept over at his place and whatever. And he was like, Jess, like, because I was like, why are we always having these political discussions and these controversial conversations? And he's like, you bring it up. He's like, you always somehow bring up like something to do with the LGBTQ plus community. And I was like, Josh, I really don't think I am. Like, I really don't think this is like all me. Like, I'm pretty sure they bring this stuff up a lot and I am not, I'm not starting the conversation, but of course I'm going to contribute to the conversation. And anyway, so we went to brunch and I intentionally was like, I'm not going to bring anything up that's political, that's controversial, that has to do with like rights of any kind of community. Like, I'm just going to test this theory and see if it won't come up if I don't bring it up. Like, let's see if Josh is right or if I'm right. And so I sat there, and different things about being gay or being trans or being bisexual, whatever, it came up like 3 or 4 times. And I look at him finally and I'm like, do you see what's happening? It is not coming up because I'm bringing it up. And then when I sit back and I reflect, I'm like, all of them know that I have quite a different perspective than they do because of where I've grown up and the schools I went to and blah, 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 blah. And then these conversations come up, I think, because of that. Because, and this is true for many different circumstances. If someone knows you have a different perspective, and especially if they want to talk about it, they know they're going to hear something different from you than they would hear from like the bro next to them. And so these conversations come up more because they also know I'm going to chime in, and they know I'm going to like, and this is all also very likely unconscious for us to like do all of these things and think all of these things. It's very unconscious for us to like, say that this is why it's coming up, and they might not even realize it's happening. But people are aware of your perspective in an environment, in a situation. And I have a friend who even said like her family brings this stuff up a lot because she has studied I don't want to get the name of the program wrong, but it's like women and gender and sexuality or something like that. So it's like very deeply getting into all of these things. And so she's like, my family will bring it up because they know I fucking study this in school and I have such a like strong opinion on it. And like, they know they'll get a rise out of me even, for example. So sometimes it's okay to take a back seat and to not always feel like you have to like scream your opinion to the rooftops. And I've had moments where I'm like, oh my God, would I be canceled because someone said something that I don't agree with, and I didn't stand up and argue with them. But it's like, no, we need to protect our peace. We need to protect our well-being. We need to show up for ourselves. And we can have these conversations when we are like in the mood and have the energy. And we can also take a step back and not always contribute to these conversations, because it's exhausting and it's tiring and it's so confusing, and I get so muddled in my head about some of these things. But I remind myself that my perspective can always change. My core value is respect at the top of everything else. It's respect people's choices. People have different perspectives and they believe different things, and that is okay. And what I decide to do with my body, someone else does not have to decide the same thing. If I'm vaccinated, they don't have to get vaccinated. Just show up as a kind fucking person. That's the whole moral of these goddamn stories. Show up as a kind person. Show up authentically as who you are, and know that like yelling and getting angry is not a productive way to get your point across. It's not. Take a step back. And also, what I love is, just because someone said a point that leaves you a little speechless, leaves you a little confused, or leaves you a little uncertain, silence doesn't mean you gave up. And silence doesn't mean they quote unquote won. These conversations are not about winning. Like, what? If you don't have anything to say in that exact moment, my boyfriend and I all the time will be like, shit, okay, you made a good point. And we'll have silence in these conversations, because we're like, that's something I really have to consider now. I never thought about that perspective. And we love to go on car rides together. When we do a long car ride to like the cottage or a little trip or something, we get into it. We cry. We both get emotional about different things. We talk about the way I'm treated as a woman, how he's treated as a brown man. Like, it's just like, we get the fuck into it. And that's a great place to do it, because you're not staring at each other, and you have a lot of time to think and talk. And there's so many moments where I'm like, wow, like I didn't think about it that way. Or there's moments where I'm like, I still disagree with you, but I don't know why or how, and I need to give this some more thought. Or it's like, you just need time. And that's why it's not a one-stop shop. We don't have this conversation once and we're fucking good to go and we're just moving on with our lives. Like, no. We are constantly evolving as people. Our experiences are constantly changing. We're constantly going through new things. And so allow your values and your perspective and your opinions to shift and change. And have fun with it. Okay? We don't need to be so goddamn serious about everything. That's why I just wanted to make this episode to normalize, like, if you have a friend who believes something different than you, that's fine. Like, they also don't have to be your bestie. And for me, like, I'm dating someone who I know my most important values he agrees with. We have this utmost value of respect. So whether I believe something a bit deeper than he does or vice versa, as long as the other person is being deeply respectful to other communities, that's what's very important to me. So trust the process, and trust that, like, the relationships you have, they can look completely different. I have friends who have very different perspectives on different topics, and I think it just makes me a more well-rounded human being who understands more perspectives. And I have a podcast, and these are things I want to share on it, and I don't want to just represent my perspective. Of course, I'm telling stories from my own life, and I'm, my values are shining through in this podcast, but I want to say that, like, if you listen to this and you don't believe in something I believe in, that's okay. We can still be friends. You can still listen to the show. Like, we can still vibe out, and you can still laugh about my poo stories. Or if you hate my poo stories, you can skip those parts and you can just listen to the actual juicy, meaty part of the episode. Like, we probably believe different things about something, and that's normal, and that's human. And this has been Human to Human. So thank you so much for listening. I really encourage you to send this episode to a friend or to a family member or to someone who could get some value out of it, because it's a real topic that we are inevitably gonna have to interact with people in our lives who have different opinions and different views than us, whether that's at Thanksgiving dinner, whether that's a coworker, whether that's a friend of a friend, whether that's a relationships mutual person. It's just gonna happen. We're gonna be in circumstances where someone believes something different than us, and something's gonna come up that might get us a little feeling icky in our ticky. So share this episode and normalize that we can all have different perspectives and talk to each other about it and not just want to rip each other's heads off. I really appreciate you listening. If you do enjoy the episodes, please subscribe and download them so you never miss one, and keep up with me on Instagram and TikTok at humantohumanpod. I will talk to you very soon, probably next Monday, because that's when I post. Okay, bye.